Many have made the mistake of believing that the criminal underworld of Star Wars is just gang violence and drug trades of the Hutt cartel. The black market is a real and a thriving place, a place which trades illegal commodities such as lightsabers, military exclusive technology, Jedi and Sith artifacts, and even people. And if one were to be suddenly kidnapped while traversing the galaxy, there are many, shall we say, less than savory realities that one may find themselves experiencing. Hopefully, if they didn't fall into the hands of a Sith experiment, they may face a life of servitude to a crime syndicate, or perhaps work in the spice mines of Kessel. Slavery was an unfortunate reality in certain parts of space, but any of those fates would be far better for them than falling into the hands of one Dr. Cornelius Evazan and having their life permanently doomed and became one of the decraniated. Welcome back today to our creaking archives, my friends, where the horror continues in today's Dark Holocron. Dr. Evazan, prior to completely losing his mind, was an extremely successful cosmetic surgeon on a clinic on the desert world of Abafar. Right after finishing his schooling and gaining a positive reputation with the community, madness would consume the doctor for an unknown reason. One day, the doctor began practicing what he called creative surgeries on his patients without any assistance of the droids. Hundreds of patients woke up with their faces horribly scarred, or their limbs having been completely rearranged. The doctor even began kidnapping people, performing his torturous art while they were still awake, enjoying the moment that they began to beg for death so that he could deny it to them. Soon, the doctor gained his first death sentence on a world, as well as a dangerous bounty placed on his head. And when a hunter by the name of Jodo Cass tried to put a stop to his madness, the attempt on the doctor's life made his own face hideously disfigured. But the doctor would shockingly be rescued by an Igualish thug by the name of Ponda Baba. And from here, the two began a partnership and would lie low for a little while running spice for Jabba. But soon, the itch for creativity took over the good doctor's mind once more. His new spark of inspiration was merging technology with organic flesh, and so he turned to cyborgism to learn more and to learn how to better craft his new obsession. However, as justice pursued him, the doctor and his ally were forced to flee to the only place where they could find refuge: the Crimson Dawn Syndicate, which was led by Dryden Voss. The doctor would serve as Dryden's personal physician for a period of time, keeping him healthy. Due to Voss's mixed heritage, his physiology was unstable and he had to be constantly monitored. The doctor actually worked as a real doctor here, not performing his experiments on his employer, but at one point even saving his life through a surgical procedure. In repayment, Dryden Voss decided to reward the doctor by allowing him to satisfy his morbid curiosities. A number of underworld clients came to the doctor to receive cybernetic modifications that would obscure their identity or enhance their physical abilities. But soon, the doctor perfected what he believed would become his masterpiece: a breed of semi-organic cyber slaves that he called the decraniated. They were meant to be as subservient droids, but were in fact still people. Kidnapping his victims, the doctor would remove the top part of their skulls and replace them with cybernetic droid parts. They were still alive during all of this, still breathing, but stripped of all identity, effectively left brain dead, only able to obey the one who held their remote. The doctor would then sell them as unwilling slaves in underworld catalogs as a money-making scheme for Dryden Voss and Crimson Dawn. The first time these horrific amalgamations would be seen was on the world of Jeddah. The first, the prototype of the decraniated, would be a man by the name of Kaysin Bog, who, by a stroke of luck, was caught up in one of Saw Gerrera's insurgency strikes against the Empire. He would be blown apart by a grenade during the explosion, and would have died had it not been the efforts of the doctor, who was watching nearby. The surgeon went about collecting the parts of the man that he could salvage, piecing him back together with his new technology. The only part that he could not save, though, was the man's head. What came about in the process was the man walking around with the only organic part of him left behind being the top half of his torso, which was of course attached to cybernetic legs. A horrific sight, but a successful procedure. The doctor would amend his previous mistake by making the decraniated out of other casualties of the insurgency strikes that would leave more and more bodies behind. It was after this that he sold them as unwilling servants in a catalog though many were left behind on Jedha and destroyed in the attack of the Death Star. After Dryden Voss's own death in the year 10 BBY, the Doctor would depart Crimson Dawn due to the change in leadership, and went on to run from Imperial law, as even the Imperials were against this, and they had tracked him down as the creator of the decraniated. One of the investigators said this about the Doctor's work: his work is nothing short of a nightmare. His decraniated process strips a subject of all of their free will, turning them into living droids carrying out the whims of their owners. It is a crime far worse than that of slavery, for at least slaves can be freed. The only freedom that awaits the decraniated is the release of death. Unfortunately, the madman would not face justice anytime soon, and would go on to commit many more atrocities, collecting even more death sentences. But his facial disfigurement that he had suffered so many years earlier kept him in a constant state of pain, driving him to frequently use drugs and drinks to take the edge off. And it was during one of these drunk instances on Tatooine that he would end up picking a bad fight. His friend Baba would try to intimidate one Luke Skywalker. When the Doctor escalated the conflict by shoving Luke through a table, Baba drew his blaster, and that's when he was met with a flash of blue light. A blue light that is revealed to be the blade of one Obi-Wan Kenobi. The gangster had his arm severed and fell back into the Doctor, roughly knocking him to the floor. The two were scared off of Tatooine after this, and the Doctor offered to replace his friend's arm with a new one, an offer that Baba wisely declined, not trusting his dear friend entirely. By this point though, the decraniated were no longer in his scope of focus. The Empire was hot on his trail, and anywhere that the decraniated would appear, the Empire was there to shut it down immediately. But the Doctor decided to move on to a different sort of madness, and as far as we know, he is still at large, still experimenting with something potentially even more horrific. It's difficult to imagine what kind of sick mind of art would replace the identities of living people with the parts and minds of that of a droid. But of course, this is the same man who would later murder a woman and wear her flesh to get into a gathering where he massacred a crowd and would use their limbs to create a living creature that he referred to as his son. He's definitely one of the most messed up killers in all of Star Wars lore. Had Obi-Wan known about this man and who he truly was, it is more than likely that the Jedi would have killed him right there in the Cantina, sparing the rest of the galaxy from his myriad of horrors. The horror of his own mind made flesh. But anyway, thank you as all for joining us this time in our Dark Holocron for our spooky season. This is actually the first video in our second wave of Star Wars horror stories. But if you want to catch up on the rest of our Star Wars horror stories from Phase 1, we made a video compilation that we will link in the description. As always, my friends, thank you so much for visiting the channel today. It truly means the world, and may the Force be with you.